Since its launch in 2013, more than 150 countries representing over half of the global GDP have joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. 2025 included record investment in green energy, mining, and high-tech manufacturing. Later, we'll discuss investments across Africa. But we begin in Shanghai. Top scholars recently gathered there at a forum hosted by Fudan University to discuss the need for stronger green investment and digital cooperation.
Over the next decade, it will be crucial to deepen mutual trust and keep the Belt and Road Initiative fresh and appealing, as it is significant to keep the BRI appealing, dynamic, and full of expectations. Second, we must ensure that the BRI genuinely delivers tangible benefits to member countries and their people.
For more on this year's accomplishments and expectations for 2026, let's bring in our panel from Beijing. Zoon Ahmed is a research fellow with the Center for China and Globalization and an expert on China's Belt and Road Initiative. And Qiang is the assistant director of the International Monetary Institute. And we're going to start with you, Qiang. The Belt and Road Initiative soared in 2025. Respected universities in both China and Australia kind of crunched the numbers, looked at the projects and construction contracts and investment for just the first 6 months of 2025 totaled $124 billion. That's more than what we saw in 2024. So talk to me about what can you tell us about the engagement of China so far in 2025?
Well, I think this is basically a spillover effect. What we're seeing right now is just, the phase-out result of what the whole idea of the Belt and Road Initiative has been embraced by the global South nation. So China, ever since 2012, actually has been telling the world that we're going to have the Belt and Road Initiative because what we believe is, the common community of the shared destiny, the shared fate for all human beings. Because China believes that we can, make this model work in many global South nations because they probably share the same kind of the features like the large number of the population and also the lower starting point, and also they want to pursue their own dream in the modernization and digitalization and etc. So I think, but they are hesitating because they want to see, okay, are China boasting about what they're doing and is that going to work for us? So China just to show all kinds of proof within its own country that shows that it really works. And also China started sometimes a demonstration center in a small scale of the project, all over the Belt and Road Initiatives, only starting with a few numbers. And after 10 years, I think by the days of the 2023, I think many countries are seeing that China are actually doing it and delivering it. For example, China by the year of 2023 has already become the #1 manufacturer and exporter of the EV or all kind of the automobiles, and also Chinese electricity generation also become the #1 in the whole world, and also China catches up with AI and many of the cutting edge technologies. So those nations believes it, they buy it, and Chinese idea was sold. So they've been signing a lot of the deals with China, and they find out more than that. China has no string attached. China do not want to make them choose side, do not want to sell them any kind of the policies or ideologies. What China only want is we want the world to become better places, more peaceful places.
Zoon, let me kind of piggyback off what he just said, then we can dive a little bit deeper. But, what he just outlined to a lot of people, this is too good to be true. As an idea, it was huge, which means execution is difficult. This has evolved over time. Talk to us about the evolution of the BRI.
Actually, thank you, Mike, for asking me that question, because I'm listening to what Qiang is talking about, and I completely agree. And what I was thinking is, how has this expectation, the dynamism that's been associated with the Belt and Road Initiative from the time that it was announced in 2013 up until now, it's really evolved. So also, coming back to what Professor Xu was talking about, I think I can say that from a Global South perspective, what China is really doing is also being very receptive to what are the evolving needs of the vast majority of the world. So let's go back to 2013 when the Belt and Road as One Belt, One Road was announced. A lot of countries at that time, it was also in the aftermath of the financial crisis, a lot of the traditional institutions and also the countries that were essentially investing in countries' infrastructure, developing countries' infrastructure, had ceased to take that kind of interest. And then you had all across, Africa, parts of Asia, Latin America, entire regions that were looking for hard infrastructure investment. I'm from Pakistan, and I know that at that time in 2015, when the first phase in my country was announced, it was really a combination of the energy infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure, and also the port of Gwadar and special economic zones that we desperately needed at the time. You had Sri Lanka, you had so many other countries and regions that had a similar need. So what China's, the first phase, the first announcements were really also, these investment plans, these hard infrastructure investment, ports, pipelines, etc., that were essentially a requirement of the countries. Now what's happened, since 2017, 2019, we saw that greener infrastructure, more environmentally friendly infrastructure. In the meantime, China had also been investing heavily in green energy. China is the largest producer and the largest exporter of this capacity building. I also remember, I've been in Beijing for 10 years, and my focus has consistently been the Belt and Road Initiative. Back in 2018-19, there was a lot of effort by Chinese, universities, think tanks, organizations to get Global South partners together and to help them understand the benefits of and the partnerships they can create with China in order to grow towards greener energy. Then we saw the phase two. We saw that how do we utilize this infrastructure, great focus on industrialization, special economic zone development. And eventually, I think what's recently, post-COVID especially, we saw that health became an important aspect. Over a decade, right? It's been 12 plus years. I think the BRI has been evolving to understand the needs of the vast majority of the world and to focus on a development that lasts.
Well, and Professor Chu, to that point, if I'm in an area that's, struggling, and I produce agriculture, and it takes me 4 hours to get it to market, and suddenly there's a train, excuse me, and I can get it there in a half hour, and I can get home that night, and I sell my product, suddenly I can be lifted out of poverty, and that's one of the linkages here. I mean, when you look at all of the projects, construction contract values have exceeded $1 trillion across participating countries over time. And then with the evolution phase of this, then getting into the green technology. Now you have solar panels to help light your homes and that sort of thing. I mean, this is part of the evolution, and part of what we're seeing and what Zoon's touching on, this is changing people's lives.
Yes, exactly. Well, I've been doing poverty alleviation within China for more than 15 years. I think I fully understand what Ms. Khan we're talking about. In China, we have a motto. We say, if you want to get richer or get out of the poverty, you need a road first. And I think this is just a Bible, getting out of the poverty. Because in China, we have many mountainous area. Usually, the mountainous area overlaps with extreme poverty-hidden region. And China found this problem, and we started to build the infrastructures. And we do found, according to my experience and according to empirical studies, was the road expanding, and the people will get out of the poverty very soon, like you just mentioned. Well, when you are 4 hours away from the nearest water resources, and also when you are 1 day away from the nearest market, it's basically impossible for you to get out of it. But right now, I think within all the village level, China will spend at least, at most, 30 minutes to get to the nearest, highway. So I think this is a great achievement considering China was just a, large country. And also China, replicated all these kind of models in many countries want to share with China with the BRI, development agenda. So they see that this really works. To the basic infrastructure 5G tower, to currently the renewable energies, and also the EV. So this is like a ladder, not only getting out of the grinding, most desperate poverty, but also give them the one silver lining and the beacon towards getting the well-off situation.
And Zoon, to that point, I mean, this kind of the building blocks as he described it, I mean, there's a solar park in Pakistan now. As far as your eyes can see, there are just solar panels everywhere. I think it's 6,500 acres of solar panels. That makes a huge difference in terms of energy, and it also produces jobs.
No, absolutely. Back in 2007 onwards, my own country, we had a horrible energy crisis. We deindustrialized during that period. I remember we would have 12 to 15 hours of energy shortage, energy outage. We would call it load shedding every single day. And that I'm talking about the biggest cities, maybe the best, living communities. They had 12 to 15 hours of power outages. And during that period as well, before the 2015 announcement, the $46 billion intended investment announcement when President Xi visited Islamabad, even before that, 3-4 years prior, it had become a trend in Pakistan for many people to just import solar panels from China and have them in their houses, including my own and including almost everyone I know. And those solar panels were affordable. They helped us, deal with a situation that was almost impossible to deal with. And gradually, even the first phase, a lot of energy infrastructure was announced. It has delivered. Like you mentioned, we have a massive solar panel project in Pakistan. And again, that process of individuals or smaller groups, companies importing solar panels from China also continues. It's making energy affordable. It's making it feasible. It's also, creating job opportunities for people because again, without energy, without electricity, there's little you can do.
Professor Chu, let me go to you with one final question before we move on. A few years back in Hangzhou, I had the chance to sit down with Jin Lichun, the head of the AIIB, and kind of talk about his vision and how it coalesced with the Belt and Road Initiative. It's been amazing, their contributions. I want you to just touch on that briefly and then look ahead to 2026 and what we can expect.
Well, number one, I think is still the consistent and sustainable support financially. Well, if somebody can, borrow you, can lend you 30-year-long large sum, finance resources to help you to grow your own home with only less than 3% or even 2% of the interest rate. Well, I call him probably, the savior from the heaven, or even I know my mom wouldn't do that. And secondly, I think it's knowledge support, because AIIB is not just only a bank, but more than a knowledge center. So sharing all kinds of knowledge, especially the technical knowledge of how you form a project, how you build things, how you make things happen, from the ground zero. I think this is also very valuable. It's probably equally valuable than just the financial resources. And also, thirdly, is about the managerial experiences of personnel. And also, I think this is very important. And alongside with that, we have lots of the personnel exchanges. For example, we ask lots of the global South nations, officials, engineers to come to China or visiting other global South nations to learn how to manage and build. So I think this is also very valuable, because most valuable products or the assets you have after all this kind of the project is not just a road or bus or the EV, or solar farm. Is the human resources, highly trained with the managerial experiences and knows how to build your future.
And 2026 looks promising?
Yes.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you both. Really appreciate it. Great discussion. Thank you. Africa and Central Asia emerged as the top destinations for China's Belt and Road Initiative in 2025, with investments in the first 6 months totaling some $64 billion. Joining us now from Oslo is Erik Solheim. He is a former UN Undersecretary General and currently president of the Green Belt and Road Institute. And from Cape Town, Sanusha Naidu is a senior research fellow with the Institute for Global Dialogue. That's where we're going to begin, because South Africa became the first African country to sign up for the BRI in 2015. Talk to us about the impact you've seen in South Africa as a result.
I think, in a sense, South Africa's, being the first country out of the blocks to sign the BRI is very symbolic and very critical, in the sense that South Africa sees the role that it can garner and harness with the Chinese under the BRI. More recently, we saw, in the context of bilateral relations between the two countries, the BRI becoming very significant in terms of the upgrading of the partnership and the bilateral relations. But also, South Africa realizes the potential that the BRI has in terms of not just the kind of domestic relationship or the domestic investment that can lead to, but also the kind of regional impacts it can have for regional connectivity projects, renewable energy projects, and so forth. So I think on that score, it's very important to recognize the way in which both sides, South Africa as well as its counterparts in China, but also I think elevating it to a more regional and continental level in terms of the value proposition that the BRI represents.
Erik, let's talk about what she just talked about, potential and elevating, because I know you were just at this academic forum in Fudan University in Shanghai, talking about the BRI and its potential and different directions it can go. Talk to us about those discussions and some of the ideas that kind of germinated.
I mean, look, first of all, it's important to celebrate the enormous success which has been Belt and Road over the last about 10 years, which we heard about from South Africa. But look, railway was made from Djibouti to Addis Ababa, railway through Kenya, in Indonesia, Laos, China railroad, and now also Premier Li Qiang went to Lusaka in Zambia and announced that historic Tazara railroad from Tanzania to Zambia will be revamped. And these are just some of the examples. But we also look into the future, what is next. And next is more of the same, more infrastructure, and more green energy. But it's also a change into health, into education, into what President Xi has announced as small is beautiful. So it's more of the same, and also more of something new. And one example is, of course, the digital economy, the new 5-year plan, which is just agreed in China and which will be launched next year. It's an enormous focus on the digital economy, and China can, of course, help the developing world a lot by making digital technology and knowledge available for other developing countries.
Well, Erik, you make a really good point, because I think all too often we kind of lump everything together, 150 countries, all these different projects, ports, railroads, that sort of thing. But you kind of get it more granular. Can you talk about one crown jewel that you look at and you say, wow, this really made a huge difference?
I think a very good example is, well, that's in the commercial sector, but that was DeepSeek. When DeepSeek launched its new artificial intelligence platform early this year, it made it a global common good. What does that mean? Well, a business in South Africa or in Norway or in Paraguay can use that platform to run its business. And of course, it's an enormous opportunity when that's made free of charge rather than very, very expensive. And through that, we will avoid this digital divide where a few countries, mainly China and the United States, will run far ahead of everyone else, and the rest of us will really struggle to compete. So it's wonderful if artificial intelligence can be made global platforms, not just platforms for those who can afford high costs.
Yeah, Sanusha, let me ask you about that, bridging the digital divide, because, we have the haves and the have-nots when you look at things globally, and clearly this is an area, artificial intelligence, where boy, the people who are struggling could really struggle quite a bit moving forward. What kind of a difference is this making?
Well, I think to build on what was being said now is the question of how this actually reduces cost of capital, in a sense of how does it become much more affordable. And these kinds of AI technologies can do that, particularly in terms of how these can play critical roles in terms of moving the needle around issues when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to issues with regard to developmental policies and so forth. And I think that's the general kind of purpose that we see with these kinds of initiatives, making it a global public good or common good, which is very important because the access is important, but so too is the access in terms of affordability, and it actually reduces the cost of capital in that sense. But having said that, I think we also have to be very cautionary as well in terms of how does the data get mined. What is data sovereignty when it comes to the digital and the AI? And more importantly, what is the kind of protectionism that exists, particularly at the national level in terms of data protection, data sovereignty, and so forth. So I think it's kind of managing those very important kind of juxtapositions between affordability, access, and how it can actually deepen more kind of better healthcare productivity, healthcare, rollout, etc., but managing that with how does the privacy and the data management of information is stored, where is it stored, and how is it going to be used in terms of who has access and who controls that data.
Yeah, Sanusha, one of the key issues in South Africa, as you well know, is youth unemployment. It's very, very high. And that obviously needs to become a priority moving forward as well. It's interesting, Charles Ray, the former U.S. ambassador to Zimbabwe, said this: a digital infrastructure under the BRI could help to unlock much of Africa's demographic potential. Do you see that as an avenue to focus on moving forward?
It is a potential avenue, definitely, in terms of how that investment in the digital infrastructure actually bridges those unemployment issues when it comes to the youth. And you do know that Africa is the positive demographic profile when it comes to the global dynamics around where the youngest population is going to be in the next 25 years under the age of 30, which is the youth bulge. But the youth bulge can also be a potential challenge for countries and governments, particularly if they're not addressing that unemployment gap. But more importantly, if the skills development is not inserted into that kind of digital technology engagement, investment, and so forth. I think also what we have to be very, very conscious of and talk about in a much more honest way is the fact that we have a population in Africa, young people, who have demonstrated how they use digital technology and how they want to use digital technology. So under the BRI, I think there is a potential for that, but it has to be harnessed in a manner that doesn't necessarily create a kind of negative impact on the youth. It's not about necessarily using the technology to track the youth, but rather to enable the youth to become their entrepreneurs of the future and to enable their opportunities economically, socially, in terms of what the digital infrastructure under the BRI means for them.
Erik, you know, as you look at the global landscape, we have camps that are in globalization, you've got camps that are into protectionism. We've seen the effects of the BRI. I heard one person refer to protectionism as the bridge to nowhere. Can you talk about the fact that you have so many countries involved in this and the benefits that they're all seeing?
Like 150 countries are participating in Belt and Road. Sometimes you hear complaints mainly from the United States of America. Well, then my answer to my American friends is very simple. If you have some complaints with Belt and Road, please do better. It's not like any African or Asian nation prefer to work with China and not ready to work with the United States. I mean, every nation wants to work with both the United States and China to promote their interests, their welfare, their prosperity. So if there is any complaint in Belt and Road, please do better. Reality, of course, is that Belt and Road is now by far the largest investment scheme in our time. In the past, it was brown. There was a lot of investment in coal and oil and gas. Now it's the greenest investment scheme in the world. All investments are in hydropower, in solar and wind. And of course, in all these technologies, China is now far ahead of the pack. I mean, China is 60% of solar, wind, hydropower, electric cars, electric batteries, basically everything. And we need Chinese technologies. I mean, not only the developing world needs Chinese technologies, even Europe and North America need Chinese technologies if we want to go green fast and cheap.
And Erik, to that point, I was looking at the numbers. Green energy investment with BIR cooperation, a record high this year. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of almost $10 billion invested in wind, solar, and waste-to-energy projects for the first half of 2025. This is an effort, in a sense, to really address climate change as well.
Absolutely, and you see the results. I mean, just this week, the figures for electric cars came up, and a number of developing countries are now in the lead. Look, in Nepal, one of the poorest nations in Africa, nearly 80% of all new cars are electric. In Vietnam, it's 40%. In Singapore, it's 45%. In Thailand, it's more than 20%. And in Ethiopia, it's also 60%. So a huge number of developing countries are going green in the transport. But nearly everywhere, the cars are Chinese, because Chinese cars are much cheaper. Chinese electric cars are much cheaper and much more high quality at the same time. And that's why they're dominating the markets. And exactly the same you see with solar. Solar is not the cheapest energy everywhere in the world. If you switch from coal to solar, you save money. But again, this is largely thanks to China, because it's Chinese companies who have brought down the price in solar so dramatically that everyone now can afford the switch. I mean, you even save money by making the switch.
And Sanusha in South Africa, one of the key projects there, of course, with wind turbines, about 163 of them built in 2017. Talk to us about the difference that makes.
Well, it does actually enable us to have a better access to the grid. It creates that level of relative stability to the electric grid. I mean, you do know that South Africa has been grappling with an energy source issue. Its energy supply has gone through various waves of instability. At the moment, we're enjoying an energy grid that is still relatively stable. We haven't had interruptions to our electricity supply. So that has been a positive impact in terms of not just on the wind turbine, but also from the level of policy at the government level and ensuring that there's a level of continuity in terms of electricity supply. But again, those are those levels at which the electricity supply is stable for the moment is again the fact that South Africa is still dependent on coal as a major source of its energy production. So at that level, we have to be careful and look towards what these wind turbines and other renewable energy sources can create for us in South Africa in terms of moving towards that level of greener energy supply, but also linked to adapting to the climate change conditions and the mitigation of risk. At the same time, I think what also makes it important to understand is that it's going to be a while before a portion or a major portion of the population in South Africa are able to embrace the kind of green renewable energy sources. It's not as cheap as perhaps it may be elsewhere, but it's still very much about the taxes that we have to pay in moving towards solar, and of course the questions around the access that you may have. So at this point in time, I think those wind turbines may have been important. They have created some kind of impact on the grid service, but at the end of the day, for the broader South African public, the ordinary person on the street, we still have a bit of a way to go in terms of the kind of solar energy, green energy that we are hoping to embrace.
Erik, I'm going to give you the final word because you brought this up earlier and I wanted you to touch on it a little bit more. Small but beautiful, it's a mantra that we've heard. What does it mean for you as we head into 2026?
For example, I mean, China can not only offer money and investment to the other developing countries, but it can also offer best development practice. I mean, no nation in human history has brought so many people out of poverty at such a fast speed as China. True, I mean, Singapore, South Korea, Vietnam, and some other Asian nations have also done very, very well. But China is the largest example. So China can share that knowledge, how to bring everyone out of poverty, how to go that extra mile to bring the last people, those in the remote countryside, not those in Shanghai and Shenzhen, but those in the remote provinces of China out of poverty. How China did that. And then I focus on education. How did China provide education to everyone? That will be very helpful for other developing countries. Then other on health, how to make vaccines affordable so that every single citizen on planet Earth can get all the major vaccines and then avoid dying young from completely curable diseases. So China can add money and technology, but it can also add its best practice so they can learn from it.
I want to thank both of you for joining us. Some great insights there, and all the best to both of you as we head into 2026. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching.